Here's a map of the Blackdown Hills. You can see that it's a large area. It's almost 400 square miles. Each one of those edges of the Blackdown Hills is about 20 miles. And so it's a large, relatively unknown area of outstanding natural beauty. And you can see that it straddles the border between Somerset and Devon. And it's just got one major road going through it, the 303, which I'm sure you've all been down a million times. But apart from that, there's no towns on the Blackdown Hills. There are just hundreds of miles of lanes, some of them very poor, and hundreds of miles of hedges and hundreds of small farms hidden away. It's a very special area. I've photographed in the Blackdown Hills for over 20 years. How did it start? Well, it started in 2002 when I was given a commission from the then Countryside Agency to make an image bank for the AONB when it was newly designated. My commission was to capture the spirits and essence of the Blackdown Hills, which was quite a challenge. And how to start? Well, they suggested that I went to the hedge event because they're really into hedge laying on the Blackdown Hills. And every year it's like the annual show of the Blackdown Hills. It's now called the Skills of the Hills Day, but it's all based around a hedge laying competition with lots of other things as well. And it's a great meeting point for all the farmers and people who live on the Blackdown Hills. So off I went, and I was duly introduced to lots of farmers who knew that this was going to happen. And they invited me to come to their farms. And so I made lots of good contacts that day, and off I went. Here's a picture of some hedge layers. It wasn't on that day, but that's what happened on that day. There were hundreds of hedge layers there, all competing in a competition. So I started visiting these farms and met the farmers. Having a background in farming, I was always very interested in what they did and could understand. I was on a large dairy farm and I'd kept my own sheep, a flock of sheep and pigs and chickens. So I was pretty au fait with farming. And I gradually realised that all these farmers were actually related. Many of them were related to each other. And I got, I heard you were my cousins last week. So that was all very lovely. And a lot of them have become very good friends, and I've been back to visit them many times. So here's three examples. The first one is Roger Paris, who is a real sort of champion hedge layer. He's won many, many competitions, and I think he taught the Prince of Wales to lay hedges. And he's also has a dairy farm in the Arty Valley. The next one is a picture of Henry Derriman, who's another farmer in the Arty Valley, but he specialises in breeding a flock of pedigree Hampshire Down sheep. And this is a photograph of him preparing one of his shearling rams for sale. And then there's Libby Lister, who became a great friend, and she's a very artistic farmer, and she took a great interest in my photography, and I visited her so many times and discussed where I was going and what I was doing with her. Sadly, she died earlier this year, and so as a tribute to Libby, I've devoted a section of my exhibition to her. She was a very special person. All this photographing of farmers and visiting their farms all came together for me one day. It was a farmer's shoot in the Arty Valley organised by Roger Paris, and I'd been out all morning with them following the shooting, riding around in a bumpy old tractor. And at lunchtime we came back and everybody brought out their sandwiches and ate them in a modern shed. But I'd been round the corner in the farmyard and I'd spotted a lovely place where I could take a big photograph. So I went back to them and asked them if they'd be up for having a group photo. And they were very delighted. And they all trooped out into this farmyard and lined up for me. So I stood there with my camera on the tripod and I felt really privileged to be taking this picture of these very special people. And I feel it's really quite a historic photograph. They were all born and brought up on the Blackdowns, many fathers and sons there. As I stood there taking this photograph of the farmers, I felt I really was capturing the spirits and essence of the Blackdown Hills. So why do I photograph in black and white? If we just go back to the hedge picture for a moment, it's a good illustration of how it simplifies the image. Because it doesn't matter whether Terry on the left is wearing a red jumper, a green jumper, or a blue jumper. what's important is his face and what he's doing. And the black and white image takes you straight to that. So it simplifies the image. And in fact, it's more colourful than colour. It's a much more artistic interpretation of the scene in front of you. And I actually went back a few years ago and did a study of 100 farms and photographed their buildings, because I wanted to be able to put all these photographs of buildings together to show how special they are, because it is very hard to appreciate that when you walk or drive around the Blackdown Hills, because you just don't see them. They're all hidden away, all tucked down in little corners. And I put these together into a book, and you can see the book in the exhibition. As I've moved on as a photographer, and photography has changed over the years. I went to a talk and was introduced to the world of digital infrared photography. This is where a camera gets its filter changed so that it's sensitive to longer wavelengths of light, the infrared. And this has the effect of lightening anything that's green, because it's the opposite side of the colour spectrum, and it dramatises skies, and it works really, really well in the Blackdown Hills. I found it to be a tremendous step forward in my photographs there. So here's a picture of old Blackdown's thrashing barn, and the ivy that's reclaiming it comes out white and attractive, and it accentuates the textures in the stone and dramatises the skies, and altogether makes a very pleasing image.